Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Wednesday, the 21st of April. This morning, I would like to take some time to talk about 9 minutes and 29 seconds. I'd like to talk to you about racism. I'd like to talk to you about missing and murdered Indigenous women. Yesterday, the world watched as Officer Chauvin found out that he had been found guilty of 3 different charges relating to the death of George Floyd. The world was on watch, waiting to see what would happen in Minneapolis. Would people revolt if the decision came back that he was not guilty? Would people riot out of great excitement that he was found guilty? What would happen for all those people who were gathered? How would his family feel? How would the community feel? How would America respond? We saw a lot of people who were crying. We saw a lot of people who were rejoicing that because justice has been done. The fact is that justice has not been done for the man who is dead. He is dead. He cannot come back. A mark toward justice has been made that someone who intentionally tried to stop someone else from living, put it that way, has been found guilty and will now spend probably the rest of his life in prison. That is a mark towards saying that the United States and their justice system and their understanding of who people are and how people should be treated might be beginning to change. 9 minutes and 29 seconds too late. Before I go any further, I do say that we need to be praying for Derek Chauvin. We need to pray for him because the rest of his life as he knows it will probably be hell. We need to pray for his family because their lives that day, almost a year ago, turned completely upside down by no choice of theirs. And now they will live with the guilt and the shame that comes with being connected with him. And I hope and I pray that their neighbors and their friends, their co-workers, the people who go to school with them, people who were in their neighborhood will be able to separate them from what he did. That the sins of that man will not be tarred and feathered on those of the people who loved him, who were around him, who stood with him in the court to support him. As Christians, we can do no less than to pray for him and to pray for them. But I do believe that we have work to do. Being a Christian does not mean we're perfect. That's why we're Christian. If we were perfect, Jesus would not have had to die on the cross for us. We are little Christ. We are Christ's little people. We are people becoming Christ-like to the best of our ability, which means we do make mistakes. We do have our quiet biases and things that we don't realize. I know very few people. I know very few people who have outright biases or who are outright racist. Although I do know people in my life who are. And I imagine to some degree I am as well. I'm not aware of it yet. I pray that when others see these things in my life, that they will have the courtesy, they will love me enough to pull me aside and say, were you aware that? And help me to grow and to change. Our neighbors to the south feel, it seems to me that it's like they're a pot of water with the lid on, sitting on 9 on the scale of heat on the stove. They're going to boil over. If the lid doesn't come off and the pressure relieved, they're going to boil over, and more people are going to be killed. More people are going to be hurt. More people are going to make decisions that in a clearer mind, in a less stress-filled moment, they would not have made. And so we need to pray for that. But we need to work as Anglicans, as Christians, as Canadians, as citizens of the world, we need to do some deep diving into our own selves to recognize where our own biases might lie. Think about, ladies, I invite you to think about the last time you were walking through the streets of Edmonton or Toronto, maybe later in the day or in the evening or at night. At what point, what happened, or who did you see when you realized you were clutching your keys in your hand, or pulling your purse closer to you, or pulling your child closer to your side? When you were driving down the street and had to slow down, in what neighborhood did you realize that you were checking to make sure your doors were locked? How often have you heard something or seen something that caused you to make sure that your doors and your windows were locked in your house? Gentlemen, when was the last time you were in a hockey rink locker room after a pickup game of shinny and stupid jokes were told about someone or something of some ethnic background? When was the last time you remember being at work when you recognized that someone was passed over for a job so that another could have it? Maybe because they were a woman, or because they were Black or Indigenous. We really, if we're honest, don't need to look too far before we see in our own Canadian backyards where our biases are, where our tendencies toward racism or any other isms might be. We have to be careful we do not throw stones, because stones may then be thrown at us. As I've said a couple days ago, I have been taking an online course through the University of Alberta called Indigenous Canada. And I am intentionally taking this course because I live in a diocese that has a strong, because of our former bishop, has a strong relationship and work ethic toward realizing our role that we have played as a church in the need for truth and reconciliation. A recognition that within our diocese are many, many Indigenous peoples, many of whom are, worshiping in our churches and working in the same places that we are, but also many of whom who are struggling and who need assistance and who need help, and lots of good people, clergy and lay alike, who are recognizing the different ways in which we need to reach out to our Indigenous population and those folks who are struggling from their perspective in a different way than we would to other people. Not because they are different, but because they are different. Because their culture, their experiences, the way that they have been raised, the way that they think, their very DNA is different than ours, which causes us then not to reach out to them in a different way because they are different than us, but because they are who they are, and we need to bridge that gap. We need to meet them where they are, rather than demanding that they come to where we are. So I'm taking this course intentionally because, I want to learn more about Canadian history. I want to learn more about Indigenous history that became part of what we call Canadian history. I also want to learn about what we, and I'll include myself in that's why I say we, as a white Anglo-Saxon people who generations ago came over from someplace else to sort of perch on a land where other people were already living, and through domination, whether it was intentional or not. And we do know that some of it was, and other parts weren't, I imagine. But we imposed our ways of being upon people who already had a very valid and wonderful way of being. It didn't work out real well for the most part. And now I believe that I have a responsibility to figure out how I can live into understanding a new way and maybe helping to create a new way. So I'm taking this Indigenous Canada Studies course. And in it, I'm also being intentionally aware, that I have gut reactions to things. I am hurting and feeling pinched when I hear certain things being said, But rather than arguing against it, I am opening myself up to recognizing that that's where I have a bias. That's where I have believed a history that I was taught, and I need to relearn something. I need to change the way that I think. We have an ongoing problem in Canada in that we have a whole group of people who are so silent and so invisible to us that they are disappearing and being murdered. We have now an inquiry, we have people who are reaching out and telling stories and asking questions and crying out for help and demanding assistance, as they should, for our sisters, our Indigenous sisters who have been murdered or who have been disappeared. The 9 minutes and 29 seconds is gone for them. We must stand up as a society and say, no more. No more kneeling on someone's throat, on their neck. No more listening to someone say, I can't breathe. No more listening to a wife or to a mother or to a sister saying, my sister, my child has disappeared and I need your help. No more judgment about how that might have happened, but simply the answer, how can we help you? How can we search for them? How can we help you to breathe? How can we continue to learn? How can we change our society together so that there will not be any more knees on necks? There will be no more person uttering, I cannot breathe. There will be no more mourning family when a young girl goes missing or is found murdered. We need to face our isms, folks. We need to face the fact that even as Christians, we have biases that we need to lay aside. And we can only do that when we begin understanding that we have them, learning about them, and then reaching out to others and asking for help to let us set them aside. We have to do that together. As citizens of Canada, as Christians in the church, as Anglicans in this diocese, we can do no less. Let us put an end to 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Let us put an end to murdered and disappeared Indigenous women. Let us put an end to clutching our keys, our purses, and our children closer to us because of the person we see in front of us. And let us begin to see Christ. Have a good day. Be careful. Be careful with your words. Be careful with your actions. Be careful with your prayers. Be safe. Stay home. And pray that we might all become little Christs. God bless you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael for Thursday.